Good morning, everyone. My name is Warren Goldberg. I am president of a concierge and very unique residential mortgage company called Mortgage Wealth Advisors. But I also created a new company called donewithny.com a couple of months back. Donewithny.com is a concierge relocation company that helps New Yorkers to move from New York to wherever they may be looking to go, whether it's one of the southern states or further west or whatever the case may be. We essentially handle everything from creating the big plan to make the move to bringing in all the vetted, emphasis underscore, underline, vetted vendors to make it all happen. I am honored to have today with me Jeffrey Magson. Jeffrey Magson is a partner and chief revenue officer for Kuttin Wealth Management, an Ameriprise company. Good morning, Jeff. Thank you for joining me.
Morning, Warren. Good to see you again.
So, Jeff, tell us a little bit about what you do with Kuttin.
Yeah, so with my role at Kuttin is essentially as a member of the executive team. Just for some context, our business is a franchise inside the Ameriprise financial channel. We're the largest franchise inside of the Ameriprise family. We've got about 215 people that are a part of our team. And those 215 people make up, north of 100 fully licensed designated client-facing advisors, a lot of support staff, operations team, and then an executive team, which includes the CEO, John Kuttin himself, Jake Dunlap, the president, a CFO, COO, and myself as a chief revenue officer. My background is in financial planning and wealth management. I've been a fully licensed financial advisor since 1995. Along the way, I've done a lot of individual planning with clients, recruited and trained hundreds of advisors to do the same. And then I've worked for the last 15 years closely with professionals in the accounting space. And so my primary role today is to lead our national professional alliance business across the 30 states that we are represented in America. And what that does is it brings financial planning professionals and tax professionals together who are mutually like-minded and believe that when serving clients are better off if the CFP and the CPA are working together on their personal economy or their business economy versus working separately or completely unaware of one another. And so my role is to lead a team of people to bring those enterprises together and then help them be successful at attracting clients and working with them together to build ever more revenue than would have been built separately.
I can vouch. I have the same philosophy of all the different financial professionals working hand in hand for the betterment of their clients. I've also been very honored to work with a number of the advisors at Kuttin Wealth, and their clients all rave about them. So kudos to Kuttin Wealth and the job that you all do.
Great, thank you.
A good segue into some of the questions that we were going to talk about. I commented before, but I should point out, or I shouldn't point out because everybody notices, the very relaxing and welcoming background behind you.
Yes.
You've told me that you have lived in a number of different states throughout the United States,
Sure.
Which is one of the reasons why I thought that you'd be a perfect person to interview. So tell me a little bit about where you grew up and ultimately where you moved to and why and when.
Sure. I grew up in a town called Robbinsville, New Jersey, which at the time was nowhere. There were almost nothing there. It's maybe 10 to 15 minutes between Princeton and Trenton, New Jersey, sort of east of both. And now, if I go back to where I grew up, it's completely densely populated, overpopulated, millions of businesses. I think we had one restaurant at the time, maybe a Blockbuster, which was big news back in the 80s when we got that. But yeah, so grew up. I started my practice with Ameriprise, which was then American Express Financial Advisors, in the Princeton office, which was pretty close to my home, and became an advisor and moved into the leadership track fairly early on. American Express had a habit of taking advisors who made it through the first year and were actually showing some promise to enroll them in coaching and leadership development, which was great. And so my first opportunity to leave the state of New Jersey was when I was offered my first position as a district manager, and that was in Clearwater, Florida. And so in 1998, I moved with my then girlfriend, now wife, from New Jersey to Clearwater, Florida, where we began to build a district there, right in central Clearwater. That went pretty well. And so I was asked to then move down within the same market group, move down to the Fort Myers office, which could use a boost at the time and take over the growth operations there. So had a few years, 3 or 4 years in Fort Myers, got married there on Captiva Island, and had our only child there while we were still in Fort Myers. Around that time, things were going well, and the gentleman who hired me to move to West Florida had now taken over the West Coast of American Express Financial Advisors and needed some more leadership in the state of Washington. And so he offered me a position, promotion and a position out there to go help grow that state. So we uprooted and then moved from Florida to Washington, which couldn't be more of a culture shock, demographic shock, geographic shock, weather shock, you name it. But the nice thing about it, we're going from one state without state income tax to another. So as things improve in your work life, having the ability to stay in a state that does not have the income tax proved to be quite nice for many, many years. Was in Washington for about 9 years, and then on a whim and an opportunity to go down and become an executive at a company that worked, Warren, with CPAs all over the country, helping them do wealth management, was a company called First Global based in Dallas, Texas. And so left the Pacific Northwest, took a chance, went to Dallas and lived in Dallas, north of Dallas, a town called Allen, Texas, for the next 10 years, where we grew that business and worked with 400 plus accounting firms around the country, very, very in depth in doing what we do and what we touched on earlier. I know that's not the point of today's meeting, but that's what got me there. And then we sold, the founder of the business sold that business, and I was able to come back after a year of integration to Ameriprise and join up with John Kuttin, who I then knew pretty well. And, we'd been in Texas for 10 years. We're East Coasters. We wanted to get back toward a coastal living environment. And John, in this day and age, this was 2020, September, everything was becoming virtual. John was open enough to say, you don't have to move to Long Island to work with me. You can live wherever you want. So we ended up building a home here at the beach in North Carolina. The background you see behind me is not actually real, but there's a nice background here. It's a golf course, and the beach is about 5 minutes away. So that brought us to North Carolina. So since 1998, it's been Florida, two stops in Florida, 2 stops in Washington State, Dallas for 10 years, and now North Carolina.
Tell me a little bit about each of those locations. What were some of the things that you really enjoyed about each of those locations? And what are some of the things that you disliked?
Yeah, well, keeping in mind, and again, just for time frame, the move to Florida from Jersey was in 1998. So things are a lot different there. In fact, I was just mentioning to you, I'll be down in Clearwater this coming week for work and one day of play. And it's exploded in terms of its population. So the traffic is there. When we were there in 1998, Clearwater Beach, which is beautiful, was very, very accessible. Getting out on the water was pretty easy. Everything seemed to be within arm's reach. City of Tampa what's nice about Tampa and Clearwater is you've got a beach, tropical lifestyle, beautiful water. But if you're a sports fan like I am, you've got I think almost all of the major sports. You've got hockey, football, and baseball there for sure. Plus you get all of the spring training traffic. So if you're a sports fan, which we are, you get a lot of opportunity to go see live sports. And with that, all the other arts that come to sports stadium, concerts, museums, the Dolly Museum, in St. Pete. So ton of stuff to do, regardless of what you're into in the Tampa St. Pete area, which is why it's so wildly popular. And again, leaving New Jersey with a big tax problem, going to Florida with no state income tax, didn't hurt either. But it was a great place to live. And, a lot of the people there come down from the Northeast, which is same as here in North Carolina. But there are also some folks who are local to Florida. So overall, great culture. I would say if I had a takeaway, the food's not as good as it is coming from New York and New Jersey. It never was. I don't think it still is. And and then you lose, if it's important to you, you lose the seasons. And for my wife and I, food very important. We're both foodies. Season's more important to her than me, but now that I'm back here in North Carolina and we get 4 distinct seasons, I can understand why that rhythm is important. So you lose that. It's 85 degrees and sunny on Christmas. Doesn't feel like Christmas or that holiday season, regardless of what you celebrate. But it's definitely a nice place to live year round for other reasons.
I remember going to visit my grandparents down in the West Palm, Boynton Beach area back in the 70s.
Sure.
And you're right, you couldn't find good food at all down there. You know, pizza was terrible, the bagels were terrible. But now when you go to restaurants, you know, in Southern Florida, the food is really phenomenal. I don't necessarily know if that has made it to other areas of Florida. I've been a little bit disappointed with some of the restaurants in the greater Orlando area. I've only been to Clearwater once on a conference and only wound up eating at the hotel because it was a conference. But you know, hopefully they'll make strides in that respect as well.
And they may have. We'll see. I'm headed down there this week. You know, we were looking. We have 2 nights together before my wife goes up to visit her mom, and you know, booked 1 reservation on Open Table because I was fairly confident in everything I read, but that was all I could really find. And so I'm going to work with the clients that I'm going to meet to get their local firsthand knowledge to figure something out on the second night.
There you go. We'll have to do another video about food. I should also introduce one of the many mascots in the office. That's Melody, who decided once I hit the record button, she wanted to start meowing and be on the video. So thank you for your cameo.
Yes.
So some of the good aspects, the positive aspects of warm weather and lack of state taxes, some of the negative aspects of you don't necessarily have the seasons, the food may not be as good as what you left. What are some of the things that that you have found when you moved to each of these states?
Well, I'll tell you the biggest lesson I learned on the move to Florida, which I then have employed in all of my other moves, and I would recommend to anybody. You know, we were kids. I think I just turned 30 when we moved. My wife was 25, and we had never employed movers. You know, at that stage in your life, you move yourself. You get a bunch of friends together. You load up what we got a truck. You don't really have anything, and if it breaks, who cares? It's probably junk anyway. But moving from New Jersey to Florida, we had to take what we did have, and we had you know moved into a brand new bungalow at the beach in Bradley Beach, where we figured we'd start our life together before I got this opportunity. So we had bought new furniture, we had bought new couches and beds and some small kitchen table and whatnot. So when it was time to move, we needed to take that stuff. So we did research on movers, and of course at the time you're thinking, how little can I pay to get this stuff down there? And so we went with an off-brand, not a national name, not an Allied or Roadway or one of these national brands. We went with some local company that I'd never heard of. And they, when the topic of do you want to buy additional insurance came up on the route, of course, it was just like when you go to Best Buy, try to sell insurance on everything you buy. Automatically, even though I'm in the insurance business, my initial reaction was, I don't know what comes with it. And they're like, well, you get, I don't know what it was, 50 cents a pound or something like that. And I'm thinking, wow, 50 cents a pound, that sounds like a lot. If something gets broken, I'm sure that 50 cents a pound will cover, this. Well, in our case, when the truck, the way they load these trucks up is they put as many moves as they can into one big 18-wheel truck. And our truck was loaded, our stuff was first. It was all the way in the front of the cab. Then they went around, picked up a bunch of other stuff and started headed down 95. Somewhere in the Carolinas, a hurricane had come through during the course of their journey down. And they had pulled underneath an overpass because it got so bad they couldn't see. What they didn't realize when they pulled under the overpass is that they had ripped the top, like the top of the 18-wheeler, kind of like a sardine can, and rolled back just enough that it was significant, but the drivers didn't realize. So for the next 5 days, they traveled through tropical storm-like conditions. And when they got to our modest apartment that we were now renting, the guy gets out of the truck and he says to me, "I'm sorry we're late. Storms were terrible. Did you buy the extra insurance?" And I said, "Oh no, what happened?" And literally, they opened up the truck. Everything was soaked. It had been entombed And, they packed that stuff very compact, and then the water just soaked through everything. All of our furniture was white. All of our furniture was now green and black with mold. Everything was ruined. The 50 cents or whatever it was a pound didn't cover a fraction of it. And so my number one tip in learning from that move is strongly consider maxing out on the insurance coverage, because that is a freak occurrence. Could have never seen it happening. But we see car wrecks all the time and trucks on fire, and that's somebody's stuff is in those vehicles. And in this case, it happened to be ours.
I'm so sorry. You during these moves, what is something that in hindsight you feel you should have considered but didn't think to consider, besides the insurance and the move?
Well, that's a great question, and I think much more recently. So going from the first ever move to the most recent move, we moved here to coastal North Carolina, which is beautiful, and it's got everything that we thought we were looking for right here, in terms of golf and access to pools and the beach and the pickleball and all that stuff. We came from Dallas, and so Dallas is a metropolitan area where one of my biggest things I've enjoyed about living in Dallas is it seems so easy to live there. Anything that you needed, whether it was a Target or a fast food run or a great restaurant or a doctor or one of those emergency dock in the box places or a Starbucks, everything was less than 5 minutes away, no matter where you lived in the Metroplex. It was just repeated everywhere. So that it turned into a bit of a bland universe. It's very flat and everything looks the same, unlike here, or if you live in the mountains, or like when I lived in Seattle, nothing looked the same, but everything was very easy to access, including medical care, dental care, vision care, all the things you take for granted when you have them nearby. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest learnings in moving here, which I would have, I don't know if I would have changed our decision, but for many people who have perhaps more serious needs to access specialists and medical specialists, dental specialists, whatever it may be, do your research on the local providers of whatever it is you're using on a regular basis locally where you're living now before you relocate. Because what we found was we didn't do any of that. We showed up and said, at some point we need to find a primary care physician. So now it's time to go do that. And around us, nobody was taking new clients who wasn't literally right out of nursing school. So anybody with an MD after their name wasn't taking on new clients, hadn't been for years. So our primary care physicians became LPNs, which is a wonderful achievement. But for people who either crave or are used to more experienced medical professional care, maybe some folks with some gray in their hair or have seen a few things, then this place is a challenge. A lot of the folks that live around us are retired. Their medical needs are more acute. They need all kinds of things. It's just very difficult for new folks that move to town to find what they need. The nearest city is Wilmington, North Carolina, which is about 30 miles north. And there's plenty of specialists up there, but you just got to recognize, okay, am I willing to move to a place where when I need to see my primary care physician, it's 30, 40 minutes each way, and some traffic issues, or am I used to just going around the corner to my trusted person? So look into that. I'd say that would be the number one thing I would recommend in something like that is, do I have the services that are needs, not wants, available to me as soon as I get there?
Have you found during any of these moves that besides the medical services, were there other services that you just presumed you would be able to find but have had difficulty?
No, I'll say this a bit tongue in cheek though. For North Carolina, living in Texas, it's a very capitalistic state, and that's why it's one of the most successful states, if not the most successful financially. Everything is open, free business architecture. And North Carolina is still, I would say, a little bit heavy on government. And one way that comes into play is the liquor stores. I mean, quite frankly, like the spirits and things of that nature. They're state run still in this day and age, which I didn't even think was a thing anymore. Yeah, we had that in Washington State in the early 2000s. But even that went away in Washington State, which is a lot like North Carolina in its government. But they realized even that there's a better way, and opening this particular business up will drive more revenue in taxes back to the state because there'll be more choice. North Carolina is still in the dark ages that way. They have the ABC stores; they're all state run. and the products that you would buy in those stores are 50 to 75% more expensive than if they had, open architecture for liquor sales. I live 25 minutes from the South Carolina border. Many of my neighbors, when they go down to South Carolina, either because they choose to fly out of Myrtle for business, or they're going down to the outlet stores, or just going down for whatever reason, will load up in South Carolina because it's about a 50% savings. And so if they think, hey, over the next month or two, we're going to probably have to buy this, that, and the other, they'll just buy it in bulk in South Carolina. So not a reason to not move here. There are solutions, but it's just didn't expect that one, didn't see that one coming, and it's tricky.
Well, I just learned something else.
Yeah.
I never knew that about.
Yeah.
If you're a lush, don't necessarily move to North Carolina.
or gives you the opportunity to dial it back, which I think is what we've done. But the other thing that was a surprise, and this is just, depending on where you come from, each state's a little bit different with the motor vehicle registration requirements. I grew up in New Jersey, and it was, 100 years ago, obviously, but you got your car inspected. If it was older than X, you had to go sit in line at the DMV and get it inspected once a year. And that's changed dramatically in many, many states. It's just not sustainable with the amount of population that way. Texas was super easy in that regard. You could just go to like the car wash, and the car wash could also do inspections. And you pay one fee and you're in and out of there in 20 minutes. When you come to North Carolina, the first thing that when I went to get our plates and register our cars and license, they have what's called a road usage fee, and it's based on somehow the value of your car and the age of your car, and it says, okay, you'll pay this one-time fee instead of paying tolls as long as you live in the state, whether you live here 50 years or 50 minutes. This is your fee to have this car registered in the state and use the roads, because there's not really a lot of toll roads. I don't know that I've encountered any toll roads here, actually. Whereas in Texas, everything was a toll road, so you didn't pay any usage fees. You just paid as you used. For us, those fees were almost $1,000 the first couple of months we moved in. One time only, but if you're not expecting it, it's an eye opener. So maybe looking into some of the DMV registration rules, especially if you have multiple vehicles and recreational vehicles, which we don't. But if you've got an RV or a boat, there's going to be all different nuances to bringing that thing into the state and getting it registered. And it's a revenue grab right up front. So you got to budget for that in a sense.
What about the cost of living? You lived in New Jersey. New Jersey had a high cost of living like New York does. And then you move to each of these other states. People talk about moving to Florida because there's no state tax. It's a lower cost of living, but then there are other costs that, at least in recent years, have dramatically increased, like homeowners insurance. Auto insurance have gotten very expensive down there. What are some of the things that you were expecting to be much less expensive and what are some of the things that you now found to be much more expensive? For example, like when registering the car.
Yeah, so when I moved to Texas, I knew the cost of living, concept was out there. And it was true. You get so much house because the expansion was going so quickly. It was really a buyer's market, so to speak, or a builder's market, even if you're building a house. So we built our first house in Texas with a national builder, not a custom home builder, but a good national builder, for less than $500,000, with a pool, a really nice yard on a green belt, almost a 4,000 square foot house, beautiful home, everything brand new. That house in the neighborhood that we moved from in Seattle would have been about 1.5 million. And it would have been on a stamp of a lot barely bigger than the house itself. So to think about that. Now, the real estate taxes in Texas, where we lived, they're based on the town that you live in. So you got to say, hey, the town that I live in can either be, very reasonable because there's not a lot of infrastructure to be paid for. Or if you lived in Allen, Texas, where they had just built the most expensive high school football stadium in American history at the time, voted in by the taxpayers, our real estate taxes were 2.5% the value of our house. So 2.5% for a house that's $500,000, you feel it, but 2.5% on a 1.5 million would be much worse. In Seattle, the real estate taxes were, 0.5% or 0.7. I don't know what they are now, but that was a big difference. Moving here from Texas to North Carolina, we moved we built during COVID. So prices of homes and materials were rapidly rising. And especially in this highly sought after area that we're in, a lot of people here come down from New York and New Jersey to retire and play golf and tennis and all of that stuff, very mild. For most people, this is their full-time home. Some are snowbirds. I'd say since we've gotten here 3 years ago, the housing prices have gone up dramatically. I think we got in kind of at a, we certainly weren't early adopters, but based on what our house, we built it for, what we could sell it for now, we got in at a good time. Plus mortgage rates were, our construction loan that converted to a 30-year is 3%. So can't give that one up. Couldn't repeat that today. So I think that the cost of living here is reasonable for what you get. I think the community that we found is super reasonable for those who like the golf and tennis lifestyle in terms of membership fees. I know that my friend lives in like near Port St. Lucie, Florida. He lives in a similar community on the water, close to the beach. He's on a river, similar vibe, mostly retired. His happens to be 55 and older, but in his community, you have to pay for full membership to the club, whether you use the stuff or not. So the demand for these places is so much higher down there. They're much more expensive and much more restrictive on what you can choose to do or not do. Here in North Carolina, it's much less. You get a much better value for your golf course community. You're not required to do anything in most of these places. There are some higher end ones that require you to do it, but for the most part, you could be a member of nothing or pick and choose from 5 different levels of membership. In my buddy's community, his buy-in is 4 times what ours was. His dues are 3 times what ours is, and he's only got 1 course to play. We have 4. So I think as you get down into the Florida market, some of the higher end, what do you call them, accoutrements to the neighborhood get much more expensive and restricted. The Carolinas are still a better value in the research we've done.
Understood. So before we wrap up,
Yeah.
as a financial advisor, are there any financial aspects of moving to another state that you would recommend a person consider either before or after the move?
Sure. Well, I think, we'd all like to say as financial advisors, we're doing the best job for our clients as can be done. So we would love to help everybody that moves to town. But what I know about being an advisor for 30 or more years is that there are a lot of very good advisors out there who have good relationships and offer good service to their clients. And most of them in this day and age are licensed in the state you're in today and the one you're moving to, because you're probably not the first person to move from state A to state B. And for us to get licensed in a new state is a matter of filling out a piece of paper and paying $65 or something like that. So it's not like they've got to go become a whole new licensed person.
I wish it was that easy in the mortgage industry.
Yeah. So I would say if you've got a financial advisor and they're doing a good job for you and you feel really comfortable with them, ask them what it would be like to be their client living in state B. If I move from Long Island to Naples, what's our relationship going to look like? How are we going to work together? Just to make sure you're comfortable with that. The second part I'd say is hopefully if you're working with an accounting professional like you, Warren, the CPA, as you know, state tax regulations differ. Federal is federal, but from state to state, there are different nuances that an accountant would want to be familiar with so that they were getting the very best advice. For example, I had a client reach out to us yesterday who's a Florida resident. Her brother is a Arizona resident, and their uncle who just passed away was a Pennsylvania resident. And there's a significant estate there that's going to be handed down. So they needed me to get them in touch with a Pennsylvania-based accounting professional so that they could talk about all things inheritance tax, estate tax, and things like that, and get accurate local state information. So I want to talk to your accounting professional about, what's the same thing? What is it like if we're working together and I'm in Florida and you're in New York? Have you encountered this? Are you familiar with those laws so that we don't leave anything on the table moving forward?
Understood. All right. Jeffrey Magson, everyone. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. I hope to have you as a guest again.
My pleasure.
And I wish I could say to enjoy that beach that's behind you. That looks, I'd like to go there today, but certainly living near the beach is a nice thing as well. You get the breeze, look out the window at the golf course and everything. Those are the things in life that we want.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the one thing that you just made me think about differing between Texas and North Carolina. In Texas, the big threat is tornadoes, and you usually get about 2 minutes warning. to get to a safe place with a tornado, and those are real. Like 10 years I was there, they happened every year. They came close every year. Fortunately, we were spared every year, but you don't have a lot of time. And they're usually coming at night. And so the news cameras don't even help you figure out, what you're looking at. But in North Carolina, we have hurricanes, and those really do come. We've had one a year since we've been here come nearby, but you get a week's notice. And so if it's really looking bad, you can get out of Dodge and get to safety, and you should have a plan for that as well.
Yeah, no matter where you're going to live, California has
Yep.
the earthquakes, whether it's hurricanes or tornadoes or the intense heat or whatever the case may be, or the intense cold. Nowhere is perfect. It's just what you acclimate to and what you're used to and what you
That's
want to
it.
deal with. All right.
All right, Warren, have a great day and nice
Thank you
weekend.
so much. Let me finish this.